I am live.
Okay, tell me when.
Go. You can go right to Zoom. All right, I mute myself, guys. Talk to you later. Welcome to Console Room 2024 and our Outside In Regenerates panel. Welcome to the Outside In Regenerates panel. My name is Amber. I'm going to be moderating this panel and also talking a little bit on the panel. So we have several of us to get through, I think both online and in person. So I think we can dive right into it with introductions. Let's start online, maybe with Arnold.
Oh, hi. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. I'm Arnold P. Blumberg. I am the owner and publisher at ATV Publishing, which has been putting out the Outside In series for over 10 years now. And Outside In Regenerates is our latest volume in that. And the rest, I think you know a lot of the rest of me, so that's enough. That's fine.
Gordon?
Hi, my name is Gordon. I'm the lead organizer for Chicago Doctor Who Meetup. I'm also a professional author and a contributor to Outside In Regenerates.
And Rob?
Hey everybody, I am Rob Levy. I am a professional author, contributor to this endeavor, and all around raconteur and Whovian.
All right, and then I think in the room you want to start all the way down at the end.
Absolutely. Hi, I'm T. Aaron Cisco. Hopefully y'all can hear me okay online as well. I'm a writer, mostly sci-fi, and a huge Whovian.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeremy Bement. I do a podcast called Doctor Who Panel to Panel, which is all about Doctor Who comic books from 1964 to present day. And I am a contributing writer / artist for Outside In books, including Outside In Regenerates.
And I'm Kathryn Sullivan. I write middle grade fantasy and science fiction. I've contributed to other essay anthologies such as Children's of Time, The Companions of Doctor Who, The Outside In Regenerates, The Outside In Boldly Goes, Outside In Trust No One. So there's been a few.
All right, and like I said, my name is Amber. I'm co-chair of Console Room, but also a contributing writer for Outside In Regenerates. This is my first Outside In book, which I'm just thrilled to be a part of. So, cool, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for joining on the panel as well. I'm going to toss this back over to Arnold to talk a little bit about the Outside In books, the history of the books, and kind of how we got here.
Well, I'll try to keep it short. Cut me off if you need to. So in the absence of Stacy Smith, who's sort of the shining light running the entire Outside In series in particular, Stacy had come to me over 10 years ago with the pitch for an idea about an anthology where we would cover every single classic story of Doctor Who and give someone a chance to write a very unusual, eclectic, diverse, interesting review, perhaps in a way that no one had ever seen before, because we were all in a community where we talked about the show ad infinitum, and we've done so many reviews about these stories. What's new to say was the general idea. And one of the crazy parts about it was she had come up with 160 classic stories of Doctor Who, which you can do the math on your own. And but for every one, there would be a different writer, a different reviewer writing an essay on that story, which is an insane pitch to any publisher, which is like, I'm going to do an anthology with 160 different writers we have to corral to do this thing. And I was just starting the idea of pursuing building a publishing company, very, very small, but publishing company. And we had a couple other ideas in the mix, but it was Outside In that wound up being the first thing we did. And Outside In came out in November of 2012 at Chicago TARDIS, one of the sister conventions. And it was a really exciting time to have so many of us. It basically was like a time capsule of our community. And then we went on from there, and the Outside In series continued to build with the idea that we would look at shows we all love, look at the various episodes, or in the case of multi-parters, put them together into a single story, and then put a different writer on every one and see what kind of amazing and bizarre and different and outlandish ideas people could come up with to comment on those. And so over the last decade, we've done books on the X-Files universe, on Buffy and Angel, on classic Star Trek and Next Generation, most recently on Twin Peaks, which I thought came out very well as one of the few ones we've done that's really short, because it's a very small selection as opposed to some of the larger ones. And we've built, I'm very proud of, and I know Stacy is too, a very, very exciting community of contributors, some of whom have contributed to multiple volumes, some of whom, like yourself, Amber, maybe the first time they've been in one. For many people, it's the first time they've published at all, and have tried so much, and Stacy certainly it's been a major part of her mission, to make it as diverse and inclusive and eclectic a range of voices as we can possibly represent in these communities. And so with this latest volume, we decided to go back to where it all began, and with the 10th anniversary of Outside In and the 60th of Doctor Who, do a new look at those 163 now classic stories, and put different writers on them all over again and see where we've gotten to in the last 10 years and what's changed and what different people have to say. And it has been a wonderful experience, and there will be more Outside In, but this is where we are right now.
Awesome, thank you. Can you talk a little bit about how the approach to this edition of it differed a bit from the first edition?
Well, again, in the absence of Stacy, who could certainly speak to this with more detail, one of the things that came up, as I recall, with the original Outside In was that a lot of it initially, about 50% or so, if I remember correctly, was previously released material through like blogs and online archives and fanzines, and the rest was commissioned specifically for Outside In. So in a way, some of the material had been in a little bit of circulation before, and it was a mix of new and old. Once we started doing later volumes of Outside In, it was always entirely commissioned for Outside In. And I think Stacy always felt that the original Outside In didn't quite reflect the tone and craziness that we had developed in the others, with the wide diversity of styles and approaches and that sort of thing. So I think that also fueled the idea of revisiting. And some of the rules that she set included no one in this volume would be the same person that wrote an essay on that given story in the first Outside In. So we were assured of having a fresh look at everything, except that as publisher, I played my publishing card, one of the rare times I do that, I try not to, and said, well, there'll be one person who does the same story again. So I'm the only one. And everybody else is on a story completely different, or they're new to it entirely and have never written before. And I think if you were to look at the original Outside In and look at this one, you can see how the series has evolved to reflect such an incredible range of styles. Like Jeremy, for instance, it does a comic strip as essay. It's the freedom to be artistic and break format and do all kinds of crazy things is part of what makes the series so much fun.
Awesome. I think that's a really good lead into all of us kind of sharing a little bit about our process. I think if we maybe go back and forth between in-person and online a bit, maybe start with T. Aaron on the end.
Sure. Well, it was my first time as a contributor for Outside In, and I was just happy to get a 7th Doctor episode because I'm that was my first Doctor, it's my favorite Doctor, and having looked at some of the other examples and the previous work in different Outside In narratives that had been submitted, I wanted to see if I could figure out a way to do something that hadn't been done, which when you're talking about multiple volumes containing multiple or hundreds and hundreds of different writers and things. So my story, we can share that, right? It's no spoilers. This is there's 160 plus others if you don't dig what I'm about to say. But I got Greatest Show in the Galaxy, which is a 7-Doctor episode where, yes, they get an invitation to this circus, and then things are not what they seem. And what I like about that episode is it's so unique in that it's an episode only the 7th Doctor could really do. Like, it wouldn't work with the others. And so instead of just writing that as a review, I wrote it as a short story prequel of like the elder gods who are kind of dragging the Doctor and other people into their show, as like them having tried the other iterations of the Doctor, and like, well, I hope you consider humorous. I found it humorous, like why they didn't work before they finally settled on the 7th Doctor. So that was my approach, was like, I wanted to say like, oh, this is unique to the McCoy era, but instead of just saying that, doing it like, oh, well, the reason why, by rule of subtraction, he was the only one who could pull it off. So that was my approach, and it's very tongue-in-cheek, and there's a lot of 50-cent words, because that's just my personal writing style, if you're unfamiliar with my other pieces.
Awesome. How about Rob?
Hey, yeah, so I've been in 2 of these things now. I'm in the Millennium X-Files one as well. But this is the first one where I'd worked with Stacy, and I turned in a draft. It's like, okay, you're getting there. Come on, just let your freak flag go. I'm like, okay. So I ended up doing 3 Doctors because I told him I would do pretty much whatever he needed covered, and whatever she needed, whatever, anytime, any place, whatever, right? Because it's 160 episodes. Which one's your favorite? The answer is usually all of them. So I got 3 Doctors, and then after I realized I got 3 Doctors, I was like, oh no, I got 3 Doctors. I have to write about 3 of them instead of 1, and kind of go from there. So my general approach with it was I wanted to try to keep it light, because there's been a lot of talk about 3 Doctors and the 10th anniversary and things as well. So what I ended up doing is just being kind of snarky with it. And I thought about it, and I'm like, you know, everyone always says, I love the 3 Doctors, but man, in some way, shape, or form, generally a lot of my friends are like, I wish there was more, or I wish I had more of this or more of that. In some way, shape, or form, somebody wants more of something out of the 3 Doctors than they get, right? So I ended up treating it like it was the world's worst birthday party, right? So, you know, you go to a birthday party, and your grumpy old uncle can't show up, but he sent a videotape so you can watch him. And then, you know, there's the strange uncle who you haven't seen in a while that doesn't even have a suitcase, and he's kind of shabby dressed, and then, you know, that kind of thing. So it was kind of snarky and aloof, and I kind of made fun of the weird guy walking around with a shotgun at the beginning, just kind of aimlessly wandering around. And I had fun with the gel guards and Omega, and I think I made a joke in there at one point about Omega losing face. Yeah, so I think that's just my approach, was to just kind of have fun with it. It was a totally different style of writing than I normally do about Doctor Who, because having blogged about it for Anglatopia and written about it and done panels, I've always sort of treated it very seriously. So just kind of like going, yeah, it's okay to be kind of out there with it was kind of freeing and cool. And I really love this idea of sort of blind collaboration, where I was writing something, but I had no idea how it was going to fit to the 2 people on each side of my story. To the ones that were doing the one before me, the one after me, much less anybody else. So that was kind of interesting too. And that's just kind of my approach to it and my story for it.
Awesome. Jeremy?
Well, like Arnold alluded to, this was the 3rd Outside In that I had contributed to. I did a piece for X-Files and a piece for Millennium. And for this one, I decided to use kind of my artistic ability, along with the fact that I waited till the very end to make my story, or do my entry. And I had kind of chosen the moon base, the Patrick Troughton story, mainly because my entry into Doctor Who was a roundabout way compared to most people. I actually got into Doctor Who by reading the Target novelizations before I saw a single episode of the show. And the moon base, or Doctor Who and the Cybermen, was one of the first Target novelizations I actually bought, going to the old Walden bookstore. And so my contribution was just a kind of a simple 1-page comic strip about what the moon base meant to me, being a Doctor Who fan who learned about Doctor Who from my best friend in middle school who was reading Doctor Who Target novelizations on the school bus and told me about these books and about the Doctor, and I went out and got my own book to read, and after that, that's when he was like, well, did you know there's actually a TV show that's on Iowa Public Television every Friday night you could watch? And kind of a combination of that and kind of giving my own spin about my love of the Cybermen. I think that's partially where that comes from, is I always liked the Cybermen more than Daleks, could be because I read the Moon Base before lots of other stuff and seeing Daleks. But I wanted to do something a little bit different, and I think, not 100% guaranteed, but I think I'm the only person who's contributed artwork to Outside In for any of the volumes, as far as I know. But that's me.
Awesome. Gordon?
Well, this is my first Outside In contribution, and I was invited by Stacy after we both appeared on, ironically, a console room panel, a virtual panel. And so my selection, after working through some ideas, was The Time Meddler, because it's one of my favorite Hartnell stories, and it seemed to be the one where I had a very easy idea about the monk addressing. It's called the Society of Forgotten Renegades. So he's giving a motivational speech to renegade Time Lords like the accountant and the veterinarian. You know, the ones that can't quite come up with a really good hook. And as I was watching the episode, I realized that Peter Butterworth had a very almost Troughton-esque energy to him, going against Hartnell. And as I'm writing it, I'm talking about things like, as a renegade Time Lord, you need to have like brand awareness. So you need a unique identity. Like the Master shrinks people, which is not only kind of nasty, but it saves on burial costs. Or the Warlord has that really sweet looking facial hair. And so I kind of took a cue from the Big Finish short trip story, How to Win Planets and Influence People, where I wanted it to be kind of humorous, but that way I can make my point about it. And so, and I'd always wanted to contribute to Outside In, so I saw it as a great opportunity, and I wrote my essay, and I'm very proud to say that it's been included, and I'm very happy with the result.
Awesome. Kathryn?
I've contributed to a few other Big Finish, Outside In pieces, X-Files and Next Gen. And I'd also contributed the original one because I wrote about Terminus last time. This time I wrote about the Crotons, and I was going to try to do a really, really different approach. I was going to do from the science students on the planet determining that, oh my gosh, these people did not exist. These three travelers never really happened. And it just didn't work out. So instead I backed off and said, why do I like the Crotons so much? Because it explores science. It goes back to the beginning of the way the show was originally planned. Because a lot of the science that actually happens in the Crotons are actual science. And I just thought, Zoe would have been a perfect poster for STEM girls. Because, oh my gosh, she's so clever, she's smarter than the Doctor. And I just did that approach, and it worked so much better.
I love that. Arnold, do you want to go next, or do you want to go last? Up to you. Oh, you're on mute.
I'm on mute. I just made an old man mistake. Okay. You hear me now, right?
Yes.
These Gen Xers don't know how to use it. Anyway, I already had said that I was the one that does the same story. So when we did the original Outside In, I did Castrovalva. This was definitely a case of it's my favorite. And I definitely kind of pulled the card a little bit the first time, because I think when we first talked about it, Stacy was like, well, which one are you going to do? And I definitely wanted to actually do one, not just publish the book, but I was doing a lot more writing then too than I do these days. And it was definitely, I was going to write something about Castrovalva. And I have a lot of very deep emotional context for how I feel about that story. And so when we were coming to do this, I thought, well, I'd kind of like to just do Castrovalva again, but obviously come up with some way that makes sense to be the one that does it again, apart from me just saying I want to. But then I realized the beauty of Castrovalva is it's a story about things folding in on themselves and being very Escher-esque and getting stuck in that trap and rolling around and around. And I realized, well, this is easy enough. So I decided to design an entry on Castrovalva that appears as if you've fallen back into the original book. My essay for Castrovalva is on the page, but new things are seeping through and breaking out of various patterns. And I decided for the first time ever in doing any of the ones I've done myself to try to do something more visual and a little more designy than I had done. Because I'd felt the most profound statement I had to say about it was something I'd written the first time, but I thought this time we can explore some of the meta aspects of Castrovalva. And I really enjoyed putting this one together because it gave me a chance to do something visual. And it's one of the things I love about doing Outside In is that I also am responsible for doing all the graphic design and layout in these books. There are only two of us running this whole company, so it's not a big operation, folks. And I'm doing all these books, and that's the thing I enjoy doing most is book layout. I love it. That's the most relaxing thing I can think to do is sit down. And every time Stacy sends me a manuscript for a complete Outside In, I have no idea what's going to be in there. You know, there are going to be graphics to use. Does someone want to do a flow chart? Is there going to be something, you know? And I have to lay it all out, and it's like putting a puzzle together, and I just love it. And so for me, doing Castrovalva that way, I kind of gave myself a challenge to do something a little visual. So that's mine, and back to you.
So the one that I chose was the 5 Doctors, which I actually felt a little bit bad about because I felt like an anniversary episode is one that a lot of people might want to write. But I really, really love this episode. So I chose the 5 Doctors. I'm actually I haven't watched all Classic Who, and I feel a little bit bad saying that at a Doctor Who convention too. But I have seen a number of Classic Who episodes, and this is one of my favorite Classic Who episodes. And I think what I tried to do was capture the fun in this particular episode, because I think when I watched this one, it felt like they were just really enjoying having fun in the episode. Like they were just living up having multiple doctors on the set and having everything being the something of Rassilon and going through this adventure together. It just felt like pure joy to me. So what I tried to capture was that feel of play with kids kind of creating a game of Rassilon, which is the name of the story of the essay, and kind of having sort of an adventure that they're creating together as the many doctors. So yeah, that was kind of where I went with that. So I wanted a quick note for people in the room and people online. If you have any questions for us, if you're online, if you want to add questions in the YouTube chat, those will get passed on to us. If you're in person and have a question, we'll definitely have time for that. I think you have to go up to the microphone if you have questions, and then we'll know that you have one. I've loved hearing from all of you about your processes and kind of how you dug into each of the episodes. I'm curious for those of you who have submitted multiple stories, how your approach differs for each of those kinds of stories, or is it like an entirely unique process each time?
Well, for me, the first one I did was for one of the X-Files ones. I did the story I did was the War of the Cockrophages, which for those of you X-Files fans is the cockroach episode. And going into that, I watched the episode a couple times to refresh my memory and was trying to figure out what I could do or what I can say about this story and what kind of a perspective I could put on it. And I think one of the challenging parts for Outside In is that you want to kind of critique the story that you're reviewing or talk about it, but you need to kind of figure out what you're going to do to put a unique spin on it. So for that one, I kind of created a story about a guy who lived through what happens in the War of the Cockrophages and how all the cockroaches start attacking, and you have the big explosion at the end where they blow up the plant and stuff. And it was basically about this guy who's just driving around in the country, and he hears on the radio that there's these news, almost like a War of the Worlds kind of thing, where you're getting these reports that all these cockroaches are attacking and things. And that was kind of just what kind of popped into my head for that one. The Millennium episode I did was, I always forget the name of it, it's the Boom episode. It's the one was the Unabomber episode. And that was one where I watched the episode a couple times trying to figure out what I was going to do, how I could write something about it, and still say what I wanted to say about the episode, and put myself back to that time. And I kind of waited till the very last deadline when Stacy was like, "Deadline's come and gone. Are you going to come up with something or not?" And it's like, "Give me a weekend. I can come up with something in a weekend." And it's like, "Can I write something? Yeah, it'd be easier if I just draw something." Like, all right, what are the dimensions of the page that I have to put something on? And I did a comic strip, basically me, talking about the episode and having a incessant phone ringing as I'm trying to talk about this episode. And I finally answered it, and it's the Unabomber calling me, and that's when the phone explodes. Sometimes, was it necessity is the mother of invention? I was short on the deadline, so this is what I came up with, and that it went over really well. The people, like Stacy, really enjoyed it. She thought it was neat that I did something in art, drawing, as opposed to just writing something down. And so that's kind of what I did with the Doctor Who one, with the moon base, was just kind of continuing on. We'll see what happens. The next Outside In book that's coming out, I have a story to do, and I'm once again putting it off to the last moment. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet, so we'll find out.
I gotta say, just really quickly, and I feel like I'm interrupting all of you now that I've asked you a question, but when I was in college, I'm an art and English major, and I was in a sculpture class. This is relevant. This sounds completely not relevant. But we had a deadline in this art class, long story short, that was shortened by like 3 weeks, very last minute. But the point was so that because we lost a bunch of time, we had to kind of do solutioning very, very quickly, and then we couldn't overthink it. I don't advocate for waiting for the last minute all the time. I know deadlines are a powerful motivator. They are for me too. I don't advocate for that because it's also very stressful, but it does, I think, also help you kind of get out of the way yourself a bit too, which I also like. So I guess I don't know where I stand on that, but yeah, I feel that. How was your process gone for each episode? Do you have like a process that you go through each essay?
I try to, my background is I'm a university librarian, retired. I'm used to doing reviews of other things. Back in the day, I used to do reviews for Friends of Doctor Who newsletter, where I was reviewing all the fan videos and audios. So because Stacy wants something different, I have to shut off that part of the brain and say, no. Completely different from what you normally do, because normally you summarize the episode and you do this. It's like, nope. Do a complete reversal and say, well, how's a different approach? So the X-Files book, I did Kolchak episode. I did, because I like the Night Stalker. That was a cool show. Where Boldly Goes, I basically did a time travel one. It's like, okay, yes, we're going to do something different, though. So looking at what I was doing for this is like, okay, I'll try to do something in character. Didn't work. No. Go back and say, okay, what do I like about this thing? Why do I like this episode so much? Because I will have people going, I really like the Crotons, and I get all these weird looks like, what is the matter with you? but there are reasons why, and that's why I just, okay, forget about summarizing the episode, just look at it and say, why do you like it? And I went from there. I just wanted to, because Stacy wants something different, a different approach. Because I've been looking at some of the submissions in here, like, gosh, we've got menus, we've got news articles from the characters in the stories. Like, this is great. I really like what they've done. Arnold, it's a good collection.
Those of you online, I'm going to maybe, Rob, you said you've submitted to other collections, correct?
Yeah, so I like Jeremy, did the Millennium one. I did Forcing the End. And I hadn't seen Millennium, I think, since it first aired. So it was kind of a fun journey back. And I was talking to Stacy, and I'm from St. Louis, and Andreas Katsoulis is also from St. Louis. So unlike the one I did for the Doctor Who book, I do kind of talk about, like, why is he, like, if he's around all these people with blood, why is he wearing a white robe? You know, just like, I asked a lot of questions about holes in it, like, you're about to get on a helicopter and you're wearing a really long robe with things that could trip you and things like that, right? So just, I watched the episode a couple times, just took notes of, like, things that I thought were just really weird about it, right? And just generally how the episode sort of wastes, like, Andreas Katsoulis. And then I tied it into, and man, this is going to make me sound weird. I used to run into him, like, randomly around town, like in the same way I sort of see Scott Bakula now once in a while, or John Hamm. Like, I'd run into him at a Starbucks, and I ran into him at a Target once, and it was just weird, right? And most of the time I just let him be and just stood aside. But then I talked about when he died, the memorial service for him was literally a block from my house. So I went to the wake and literally just sort of watched all of his co-stars from the Trek universe and Babylon 5 go and stuff. And it was, so it was really moving. So I kind of talked about that. And so I kind of added a more personal touch to it than I did with the Three Doctors piece. And also sort of, for an episode on Millennium, I did not write that much about Millennium. I mean, I wrote about the episode. I'm like, okay, look, this is kind of a throwaway guest star cult thing. It's bizarrely stupid. Let's just come out of the gate knowing this is really dumb, but it's dumb with Andreas Katsoulis in it, right? So, which is better than like half the other things that are on network TV anyway, right? So I kind of did poke a little fun at it and sort of ask questions like, why did you write this, or why did you write that, or like, why is he killing all these people and like just nobody suspects anything and thing. So that was kind of my attitude with it, and this was sort of my first journey into this world with Outside In. So I was really nervous, and I think the one thing Stacy really did is sort of give me a lot of confidence as a writer to sort of just do my own thing with it. Because like Kathryn, I was coming from like a more straight narrative background, right? And unlike Jeremy, I am not an artist, right? It would be all stick people and crayons if I did that. So I had to kind of find my way through it. So I kind of mixed experience with sort of editorial curiosity, and also, though, an appreciation for it. And a lot of people sort of, when they write about episodes, they always talk about, oh, the main cast does this and that. And I'm like, let's write about it from the point of a guest star, because one of the great things about Millennium is it always had incredible guest stars, right? So that was kind of the way I looked at it.
Awesome. Arnold, from the perspective of a publisher and a writer, how do you kind of balance that across the multiple stories?
Well, this actually dovetails nicely into something I definitely wanted to say as well, just in general about the Outside In, is that from the very beginning, this has always been Stacy's project. She conceived the original idea of what Outside In would be, actively worked to evolve it into what it has become, this like every book basically operating as like a collection of surprises, where even if you're a very dedicated fan, you've read all the kind of things that people have had to say, you will still hopefully be surprised and delighted at the weird twists and turns. You'll turn the page and not know what the next thing will be, or what it will say about your favorite story or your least favorite story in all these various shows, all these fictional universes. It's always been Stacy's idea and project. And from the beginning, one of the things I was always very adamant about was, except in very, very rare circumstances that are not worth really even talking about, but were usually about unfortunate real world things or logistics, I have maintained the idea that Stacy runs these books and I have nothing to do with that. I don't get involved editorially. I don't make decisions about, how this is going to go or how it's all being assembled. Stacy makes these books happen, and I'm delighted to design them and publish them and put them out in the final version. So when it comes to me contributing, Stacy is as critical, and I hope anyway, and as pointed in commentary as anyone else. And I've had times where things get thrown back. It's like, it's not quite. Could you maybe do more of that? And she's one of the best, most insightful, and best in terms of communication editors I've ever worked with as a writer. When you're working with her, you never feel that the criticism, at least I never, you never feel that the criticism feels like it's coming from a bad place. It's always like the criticism is because she wants your piece to be the best writing that she knows you can do. It's always very positive and encouraging in a way that, frankly, you're not likely to find with a lot of editors. I'd spent many years doing a lot of freelance writing for magazines and websites and everything. In the heyday of when you could actually make a living doing a lot of that, I was writing for so many people, and there's so many people who treat editing like you're a child and they need to treat you like a child and tear apart everything that you do. Stacy is always about lifting you up and saying, you've got this. This is, we need something to make this what it can be. And it's always very constructive. So I've had times where things aren't working, and she's told me so. And there were a couple of occasions where things reached a point where I was like, you know what? The best interest of the book, I shouldn't even do this. And there have been one or two where I've dropped out at a certain point and said, give this to somebody else, because I'd rather somebody write this that can do something that'll work and be good for the book, and I don't need to be in it all the time. And I think I've gotten more like that lately than I used to be, because sometimes now writing, it feels more like work than it used to for me sometimes. So I'm happy to step away if I know it's a better choice for somebody else. So anyway, Stacy Smith, the hero of the entire Outside In series and what it's become.
Yeah. I love that you are kind of also able to sort of take a step back and be a writer, not like and be able to focus on that. That's cool. All right, so the newbies. Taylor and Gordon, you're both professional writers. You're making a face like that's untrue, but it's very true. How did this experience compare to some of your other writing and process?
Who would you like to start?
Gordon, you want to go first?
Sure. This was actually, I've had several short stories published, and kind of to piggyback on some of Arnold's comments, some editors that I've worked with have been more focused on kind of what they would do, but not saying it outright. It's about, you should go in this direction, you should write more this, nobody understands this. Whereas Stacy, I think it's about the piece. And like in the feedback that she gave me, Stacy was never about, well, I wouldn't do it that way. It was, well, what about this aspect? I mean, the actual writing for me was easy because a lot of it I pulled from In my day job, I'm a marketing consultant and copywriter. So I deal with people who listen to, Tony Robbins, Gary Vaynerchuk, and I know how, malarkey-ish it is. So I was able to pull that tone into what I wrote. So that was the easy part. Stacy was really good at helping me kind of determine, okay, which of the jokes stay in and which get pulled. I mean, I was actually amazed because I was trying to, in my entire piece, not refer to the doctor by name, like refer to him as the one with the one with the scarf, or the one with the celery, or the one with the overachieving coat. And I'm surprised that she didn't say, no, Gordon, you can refer to the doctor. It's okay to do that. So I thought it was not only a great piece to write because it just came very easily, but I loved how Stacy helped shaped it into, she took a good piece and made it better rather than taking a good piece and making it mediocre, which to me it was just a joy to do.
Awesome. Taylor?
Yeah, I found a similar experience working with my longer form, like novels and novellas. Those are editors for hire, and they're good to work with, which is why I work with them, but there's definitely a feeling like this isn't really a collaboration, this is a work for hire. Like, you're paying me to do a job, I'm going to do this job. It doesn't feel like the stakes are there, they're editors for hire, which is great. It's a great field of work and things like that, but there's not that same feeling. And then with my nonfiction writing, that's definitely less of any kind of like promoting the story and more about like the bigger picture, like making sure that we're getting the facts straight, making sure that we're not crossing any lines or doing anything that could be unethical or illegal, making sure that it fits within whatever the goal is for that particular piece. With Stacy, it was the first time it did feel like a lot of my feedback echoed what you were just saying, where it was like, well, that's cool, but what about this? And it felt like, oh, like Stacy cares, like she's into the story, which I don't know if that's just like she really does, or she's really good about pretending that she does because she has to do it 160 plus times over the course of years. But it's very effective. There's some piece I did a similar thing. I tried not to name the doctors because I thought it'd be funnier this way, and I was kind of coming after a lot of the sentiment that some Whovians in name only were lobbing at, like the 13th Doctor when they announced Jodie. And the best thing about Greatest in the Galaxy is that there are these clowns, and clowns has like a lot of different meanings. And so one of the pieces of feedback, she's like, so the clowns, those are like the jerks online. I was like, yes. I was like, is that clear enough? She's like, well, you need to punch it up, but I see what you're doing. And that's something that like the editors for hire and definitely like the news and nonfiction editor, they would never say something like that. And it was very encouraging in a weird way, and not in like a Tony Robbins way, but like a very authentic, like it felt like, oh, okay, well, if you're on board as much as I'm on board, well, now I'm even doubly on board. So let's get this going.
Awesome. If any of you on the panel too have questions, feel free to ask questions too. I don't want to cut you off if you do. Are there any questions in the room or online at the moment? Yep. Oh, no. Okay. That was. Yeah. No, in sign language, I think. Cool. I think as a sort of very, very minimally emerging writer, the experience I feel a little bit of imposter syndrome being up here with all of you, because this last year I had 2 works published for the first time ever. So that was kind of a big thing for me. This being one of them. So I don't have a ton of experience. I work in the corporate communication space. I work with a lot of people. It's a very collaborative kind of space, this felt different in kind of the same ways that all of you have been talking about. In that feeling when you have 2 creatives working on the same project is a totally different kind of thing than sort of asking for feedback generally, I think. There's a kind of creative vibe that I really dig when you have a lot of creatives all in the same space, all kind of talking about the same thing. And I feel like that energy builds a lot, and I think that's a kind of energy that you could also pick up from working on these stories. And when you're reading through them too, I think the passion and the energy that everyone has in in their stories comes through really, really clearly. So I thought that was a really neat experience.
Well, I think one of the neat things about the Outside In books just in general is that Stacy goes out of her way to try to get new ideas and solicits, people that may have an interest in writing that may not necessarily have written stuff in the past. I know for myself, Stacy, I had met her ages ago at a Gallifrey convention because we have a mutual friend. And I can't remember if she sent me an email for the first Outside In book that I contributed to, or if she posted online somewhere. She was looking for people that were interested in trying out, and that was when I just kind of reached out and said, yeah, I want to try my hand at this. I had never written really anything of significance before that, and it's like, yeah, let me take a stab at this. I'm a creative person. I like to write. I like to draw. Let me try my hand at doing something like this. And I think kudos to her and to Arnold for going along with it. That if you are somebody who's creative and want to try being, on a small scale, taking a story and doing a short story or a poem, or it doesn't have to be anything really super major like a novella or a novel. You can try your hand at it and see how you like it and get some experience under your belt, which I think is, in this day and age, there's, outside of blogging for yourself, there's not a really easy way to get yourself published and have somebody help promote you and what you've done.
Yeah, I would be interested to hear from all of you if you have tips for people who are just starting out or who are interested in the Outside In series, whether as a professional writer or as a new writer, if you have thoughts on that.
Well, first off, find out where Stacy is online everywhere, and say, "Hey, I want to write something."
Yep.
Then you're on the-
I do think asking if you're interested, to your point, Arnold. There was a panel that I think, Gordon, you and I were on virtually for maybe Chicago TARDIS a couple years ago. That memory's getting a little fuzzy now, but I think we were talking about maybe this book even earlier on in the process. I'm not actually sure now. Now I feel like I'm making things up, but I know that we were talking about a book, and somebody asked how we got in, and or how we were able to submit stories to it, and I think we both had said just ask. Because I think I had just emailed and was like, I'm interested in this, and this is kind of where I'm coming from a writer's perspective, and I would be interested in contributing if there's space.
Right. The way I got involved in fiction writing was I was writing for a website called Comic Related, which is no longer there, but through that I networked with, and I met a couple of small publishers. And I think the best things you can do is, one, actually read Outside In. That way, any series, because it gives you a sense of what's happening. But sometimes it doesn't hurt. I mean, I got into this volume because Stacy invited me after we did a panel, and sometimes it's hey, I'd like to. Sometimes the easiest thing to do is send an email and say, hey, I'd like to contribute, or do you have submission guidelines for this particular work or this particular publisher? Because that's usually the best way to indicate interest. And then if there's an opportunity to write, but understand that it's not just writing, it's going through the whole editorial process. With Stacy, it's wonderful. With anyone else, it's a different process. But sometimes it's just as simple as saying, hey, I'm interested, how do I get involved?
Yeah.
And I basically say the same thing I say to any beginning writer: follow the guidelines. Stacy gives a really detailed way of how she wants it, how many pages, how many words, and it's spelled out really well. She gives examples. So, like you do with any bit of writing, you follow the guidelines.
Yeah, I would say along the same lines. I just ask. Something like Outside In is a great series to do that with, because they're they kind of go out and look for people that they have worked with before, but at the same time, Stacy is more than willing to take on somebody brand new. And it's like, just write something, let me see what you got. And she is very much willing to work with you to come up with a finished piece that, can work with the book and be included.
Absolutely. I mean, everything that's been said, I can definitely co-sign and just sort of do it. But yeah, I would say don't be afraid, which sounds like an empty platitude because you're like, yeah, you can say that, but I've never written something, or I've only written stuff in smaller scale or something like that. I think, if I remember correctly, I think I met Stacy, or I was asked if I was interested in possibly contributing after we'd done a virtual panel for something with it was something Who related, and I'm being very, very subdued right now, but I'm usually quite animated. And she was like, your energy was great. Do you write stuff? And I was like, I've known to write certain things from time to time. And she's like, well, I have this thing, and I do this thing, and we're doing this new thing. And she sent me a bunch of stuff. And I had only kind of sort of heard of Outside In. So I was like, I don't really quite get what's happening, but let me check this out. So digging, I was like, oh, that's great. I'm only really familiar with classic Who from basically the Seventh Doctor. I've watched it all, but I rewatched the Seventh Doctor over and over again because that's my doctor. And I was like, well, I hope there's some Seventh Doctor stuff left. She's like, sure. And so immediately I start looking through the long spreadsheet. But I wasn't that familiar with Greatest Show in the Galaxy because it's a terrible episode. All Who is good Who, but some Who is better than other Who. I mean, this is the one to refresh your memory is where it opens with the ringmaster rapping. Which is apparently something that producers of the BBC had never heard of and kind of used whatever 1988 Google was available at the time, said, oh, rapping, it just means rhyming every other line. It was very awkward. And I was like, well, this is fun. And so that's kind of like an upside. We're taking ads. It's like, well, when you're doing your research to write your piece, you get to rediscover hidden gems of sorts. But yes, just dive in. Like those terrible adages about if you want to teach a kid to swim, you throw them in the deep end and they'll figure it out or they'll drown. It's like that without the drowning. So.
That's my favorite one.
Did you have any thoughts, Rob?
Sorry, old man moment. Yeah, I mean, the whole process was fantastically easy because I was doing a lot of writing for magazines and newspapers at the time. So I was sort of dealing with editors that were all very here's your guideline, this is what we want, and they're very specific, which Stacy is, but it was not as I don't know how to say. It was almost business casual, right? It's like if you work in an office where everyone wears a suit. Stacy is very much business casual. It was always working in the office on a Friday, and it was always very encouraging. I was really struggling with the three doctors to kind of find an angle. So I was like, this is my first angle. This is my second angle. I think I turned in a draft at first, and I was like, yeah, come on, you can do it, and then played with it a little more, and we tinkered and fine-tuned it. And it was really nice to get that sort of editorial feedback, but also, how do you put it this way? When you work with an editor for the first time, in the same way that Arnold will understand when you work with a writer for the first time, there's sort of a feeling out process, right? And it was oh, I really can do whatever I want. That's not just a thing. I can really do that. And once I sort of realized that this is pretty much an open book and you could do whatever you want, right? And at one point, Stacy said to me, somebody's doing a comic strip. And I said, oh, okay. And ironically, I said, I bet that's Jeremy, but I had no confirmation until I got the book. But yeah, and it was intimidating too, because I knew Kathryn was involved. I'm like, okay, she's a heavy hitter, so I can't really screw around with this, right? So I was like, okay, at what point is this whimsical and what point is this serious and how can I push it? And she was just really great at sort of just pushing you to the front of the microphone so you can talk, so to speak. So.
There's a bit that I think everybody has touched on a little bit in just that the idea that Stacy has pushed for is just kind of that there's no limits. This is your unique take on it, and you can go anywhere with with where this is. It doesn't have to fit in like a traditional essay kind of format or anything like that. Which this feels very Minnesotan of me. Reminds me of Prince a bit. Only because I recently went to Paisley Park for the first time, and that was like a huge theme there, that the whole space is kind of built around encouraging creatives to kind of break out of any limits that they may have even set for themselves and just kind of pursue music from a very open, purely creative perspective. This feels like the book version of how Prince approaches music.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things about the Outside In series is that Stacy, if you come up with an idea, an approach that you want, and you submit it to Stacy, she's not going to tell you, no, you can't do that. She's going to tell you, that's good, let's push it further. She almost goes the opposite direction, which is great. She's not going to deny you to really do something. She's going to encourage that energy or that idea you have in there and take it to the next level.
All right, I'm going to do one last quick pause for if there are any questions in the room or online, because I want to capture those, and it looks like not. So we only have a couple minutes left. So I think if we want to do a quick line down about what's happening next for all of you and where we can find you maybe for the rest of Con, and maybe what's coming next for Outside In. So I'm going to get to you last, Arnold, so you can talk about Outside In a little bit, and I'll start with you, Kathryn.
Next things up is a panel on the end of the era with the 80s British TV show, and then we've got a panel about our T-shirts.
I do a podcast called Doctor Who Panel to Panel, which I am a Doctor Who fan, and I'm also a comic book fan, and I tie everything together. It's a podcast where I interview writers, artists, creators of Doctor Who comics past and present. You can find it wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Yes. Right after this panel, I'll be doing another panel called Another 10 Years, which is like looking back at the previous decade, and then, as the title suggests, looking ahead to the next one, and then followed by the Who mock trial, where we'll be having a sort of civil case of classic versus new Who.
All right, Rob.
So I did a lot of my panels here virtually with some of these other fine folks. You can find all those. Please check out the virtual components for the con, because they're all fantastic. I do a podcast with one of the other contributors to this book, Mr. Alan Seiler, and another fellow named Anthony, who does a podcast called Watchers in the Fourth Dimension. And we do a music podcast called Modern Musicology. So you can look for that. It's on any podcast platform. And then I do a radio show on KDHX in St. Louis. I do another one for Louder Than War Radio, which is based out of Manchester. And I just literally am going to start doing a show for the Face Radio out of New York. These are all like music, stuff your parents wouldn't like kind of stuff. And I write. So I blog, I write, I do Doctor Who panels for Dragon Con. So I think that's probably my next big con thing. And I'm still involved with the St. Louis CIA, and we got some stuff coming up with that as well.
Awesome. Gordon?
Well, I've also been a virtual panelist for Console Room. My next panel will be tomorrow morning virtually at 8:45 about Lost and Found episodes with Rob. I also have a short story published in a collection by Airship 27 called The Challenger Chronicles. It's featuring Professor Challenger, who is a character created by Arthur Conan Doyle, and my short story, The Secret History of Renswick Vale, has a very Doctor Who-y vibe to it. So you can find it via Amazon or your local indie bookseller. And I also make frequent appearances on the Resident of Collinwood YouTube podcast, which focuses on Dark Shadows.
Awesome. For me, I'm co-chair of this con, so I'm everywhere, and you probably won't be able to find me because I'm just kind of running everywhere. Outside of this, I am a multidisciplinary storyteller, so you'll probably also find me in every other convention here in the Artist Alley or in the art show, or something like that. That's kind of me. So I'm going to turn this over to Arnold.
Well, I've been doing panels virtually all weekend here, so if you hadn't encountered me already, I think I'm one of the last panels that's going to be put up. There's a Star Trek panel tomorrow toward the end of the day that I know we pre-recorded. It's on the schedule. But as far as ATB Publishing is concerned, we have, as far as Outside In, the next definite volumes of Outside In, we usually in the course of the series have tended to be doing them as pairs, and that didn't quite maintain here. I should mention, by the way, not only is this the 10th anniversary volume of Outside In, it literally just happened to become book 10 in the Outside In series. We did not plan that, and then I counted them, and I was like, we hit 10. So it was perfect. So the next ones will be on Deep Space Nine, continuing our run of Star Trek related volumes. We've done Classic and Next Gen, and we also did a little freebie PDF you could still get. When Picard first started, we did the first season of Picard. We haven't kept up with it yet, but we did that. And Babylon 5. So both space station shows will be a pair. As for after that, things are a bit murky right now, but we'll be looking at what other things we might be able to do, and people are always welcome to suggest stuff. I mean, there are certain series that have certainly been suggested more than others, and we know that people are interested, but we're always looking for ideas of what people might look for next. We did, by the way, I'm sorry, we did commit to one other thing for certain with Outside In. We had announced a while back that the next Outside In Doctor Who related would be called Outside In Travels Hopefully, and that it would continue to follow modern Doctor Who from when Outside In 2 stopped, which was the Peter Capaldi story Last Christmas, and catch up to the present. When we will wind up doing Travels Hopefully, I don't quite know, and what shape that will take and who will be in it. Well, we know one Doctor who will certainly be in it. We don't quite know, but that'll be the next Doctor Who volume. And I think that's about it as far as Outside In. But go to atvpublishing.com and find me on Threads at Doctor of the Dead, and Instagram as well. And that's it.
And I want to note for people who are in person, I believe Kathryn has copies of Outside In at her table down in Artist Alley. So definitely check that out. Thank you all for joining us online. Thank you all for joining us in person, and we'll see you around.